I believe in a creator of the universe. I believe that he set certain guidelines for human behavior, that he cares what happens to us. I believe that he endowed us with, in an American sense, certain inalienable rights that accrue to us as virtue of being human. But from a Judaic perspective, which doesn't really impact public policy so much. One of the reasons that I think we can have a conversation is that when it comes to public policy discussions, I try as little as possible to refer to biblical text, which means I almost never do. Mainly because what would an appeal to authority that you don't believe in do? I mean, it's a waste of time. So in the areas where I think we can actually have a conversation, where we're not talking about the value of kashrut or keeping Sabbath, which I think has very little relevant input for public policy and the kind of social fabric building that we're talking about doing. The stuff that I think is important where we disagree is man made in God's image, created, taking the premise by faith that God created us with certain inalienable rights, endowed us with the capacity to choose, endowed us with the capacity to reason, and cares about what happens to us.
Right. So...
not sure if you can say right any more cynically there, but
well,
one word can do so much.
Unintended, but...
And yet.
So, so what I'm interested in is in a worldview that could be rebooted or rediscovered now. I mean, just imagine we lost all of our, we had all the libraries burned, the internet went down, we lost all of our texts. How would someone rediscover this thing? Now, we can make an easy case that we could rediscover science. It might take some time, but if the literature of Judaism, in your case, were lost, it seems to me patently obvious that whatever is true about reality is still there to be discovered. And if there's some part of reality that is ethical or spiritual or divine or spooky, it is there to be discovered by sentient creatures such as ourselves. So how would you reboot religion, the religion that's true? Because you are by accident born a Jew.
Right.
Right. And there are 1 billion people in India who weren't. Mm-hmm. And I must imagine that on your account they have, by sheer bad luck, the wrong version of this story.
Well, so Judaism is actually not quite as exclusive as a lot of other religions with regard to this. Judaism actually says that as long as you fulfill 7 basic commandments, like don't kill people, don't steal, don't eat the flesh of a living animal, that you actually have a pathway into heaven. So Judaism is not particularly exclusive, and we actually try to discourage converts. So it's not quite the same as some of the other converting religions in monotheism. But as far as what's discoverable, I would agree with you. If the Torah were to disappear tomorrow, it would not be discoverable, which is why there is a necessity for revelation in the Jewish view. Right? The idea is that revelation was necessary, not that revelation was unnecessary, and that if people had not been graced with revelation, they would have come to this on their own.
But the principles you just gave me, you don't think those are discoverable?
Those are discoverable, right. So these are and that's the reason why I say that I think that the principles that are granted through revelation are not necessarily, I think that they caused a ground shift historically from certain ways of thought to other ways of thought. Like the advent of Judeo-Christian thought changed the way of thinking. But I think that they are also things that you can discover through contemplation, for example. So all of the things that I said about free will and reason and the presence of an unmoved mover, that's more Aristotelian than it is Judeo-Christian.
Right.
Right? And that is stuff that was essentially discovered through philosophy, not through revelation. So that is the stuff when I talk about the necessity for reason, that's the stuff I think that is more relevant. Now, I think that you do need a religious system in order to inform people who are not going to sit around philosophizing all day what are good and bad modes of behavior. Right. And, Voltaire thought the same. So I think that the notion of a dual...
But is it important to believe that those good and bad modes were approved of or discouraged by an omniscient being? Can't we just chart a course toward greater fulfillment, greater peaceful collaboration based on just an intelligent analysis of what it is to be social beings?
I don't think you can unless you're willing to acknowledge that reason, the capacity to choose, the capacity to act in the world, that these things exist, and that has to be done based on assumption, because you actually oppose some of these things, right? Like you don't think free will exists.
Yeah, but I also don't think you need free will to live a moral life.
Right, I've never really understood that position, so we'll have to get into it.
All right, we'll get there.
But to me, if you're going to have a conversation with someone and convince them, then we need to agree on the value of reason. The value of reason is not something that evolutionary biology suggests. Right? What does reason have to do with evolutionary biology per se? It's a mode of action that is more likely to preserve your species. It doesn't create objective truth. The notion of an objective truth that exists apart from you and would exist whether or not you were living. This is not something that can necessarily be gathered from science alone. Right? You have to make certain assumptions about the universe and the way that your mind reflects what is present in the universe, right? As Kant would argue.